is Big Apple Blitz with Anthony Rivardo and Matt O'Leary.
Hello and welcome into another episode of Big Apple Blitz. What is going on? Matt O'Leary alongside Anthony Rivardo. Anthony, how are you, my friend?
Doing great, man. Listen, a lot of excitement right now with all these pro days, Giants talking quarterbacks, a lot going on with the Giants, a lot going on with the Jets. Of course, missed out on Clowney. We'll talk about that in this show, but there's a lot going on. And so it's getting really exciting. New rule changes, everything in the NFL, a little bit of momentum as we head up to the NFL draft, just 1 month away. And I can't wait.
I can't wait either. We're starting to get that itch. It's almost April now. So free agency a little bit further in the rear view. We can get into the NFL draft. And I think that's a great place to start this show because, well, the New York Giants kind of get the all clear from the owner on drafting a quarterback. And the Giants will be meeting with JJ McCarthy on Sunday. So let's start with that.
Yeah, so John Mara basically told reporters that he won't stand in the way of the New York Giants drafting a quarterback if that's what Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll want to do. They have the green light, according to John Mara, which I think you have to give a lot of credit and respect to John Mara for allowing that decision to be made, considering the amount of money out of his pocket that he committed to Daniel Jones just 1 year ago. I think a lot of owners, and listen, I know a lot of fans really don't like John Mara, and I don't sing his praises all that often anyway. But I think in this instance, you kind of have to. Last offseason, he gave them the okay to spend $160 million at the quarterback position and make that long-term financial investment, $92 million in total guaranteed. And then 1 year later, he said, well, if they want to go with a quarterback, I won't stop them. And I think you do have to commend that and say, hey, John Mara is doing the right thing here. He's got to leave the football decisions to the football guys. And that's ultimately what's happening. So if the Giants do fall in love with one of these top four prospects, and it sounds like they are falling in love with at least one of them, then they will take one. Maybe they'll even trade up for one. It's going to get interesting, but it's great to know that John Mara said, okay, go for it. And so I think that really does increase the likelihood of the Giants making this move.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's nice when you have an owner who kind of just lets the football people do their thing. That's my biggest criticism with Woody Johnson as a Jets owner. I think far too often he gets involved, and for a guy or an organization really like the New York Giants, I think they're coming to the conclusion that they know Daniel Jones is not the long-term answer. You could debate if they waited too long or not to finally come to that conclusion, but the point is you're picking in the top six. You have an opportunity to move up if you really want to. Now, easier said than done because there's going to be some competition to move up. But it feels like, and kind of the worst kept secret was that the Giants are interested in this quarterback class. But I think if they can move up and get one of those top four guys, it seems like that's the route that they prefer. And I don't blame them for it. I think if I was a Giants fan or, if I was running the Giants, that's what I would be looking to do, try to get up and get one of these quarterbacks.
That's what I would be doing. And there are a lot of fans who believe that all of this is just a smokescreen, that the Giants aren't really interested, that they're going with Daniel Jones in 2024. But the one thing that I'll point to, if there's one insider piece of information that I would point to, if you circle back to when Rich Eisen kind of dropped that bomb and said that he heard at the NFL scouting combine that the Giants were talking with teams in the top three, if you watch that entire video, the number one rumor that he dropped was that going all in for the Dallas Cowboys meant that they were not going to extend Dak Prescott. And so everybody was confused when they didn't go all in free agency and sign a bunch of players. And now here we are, reports this week about how they're not going to extend Dak Prescott. So I kind of look to that one video, that one bomb that Rich Eisen dropped on the Cowboys and the Giants. I think it adds more truth and validity to it, to the Giants rumor, because he was dead on with that Cowboys one. He was the only one to say that. And now it's proven to be true. So you have to feel like him saying there's a top rumor of the Giants trying to trade up into the top three. I would assume that is also true. Now, takes two to tango. Will they be able to trade into the top three? Easier said than done. You got to find a partner, and there's a lot of competition. But Rich Eisen was dead on with that one. He's dead on with a lot of stuff. And I do think that the Giants are making moves and attempting to trade up for a quarterback. The question is just which quarterback. And they are meeting with JJ McCarthy on Easter Sunday. This will be their fourth time seeing JJ McCarthy. Dan Graziano of ESPN said in a report this week that he believes, and many people around the league believe, JJ McCarthy is the Giants' preference at quarterback in this draft class. So I think that's notable as well. A lot of connections between the Giants and McCarthy. And when you really break it down to brass tacks, this is a guy that I think Brian Daboll would love to have. 21 years old, strong arm, runs a pro-style offense, has mobility. He checks all the boxes. So I really do see JJ McCarthy to the Giants picking up a lot of steam. And I think that it's notable that they're going out of their way to have another meeting with him this upcoming Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, you got to read the tea leaves a little bit. And sometimes, sometimes it is a smokescreen. But in this case, I don't buy it. I think that's a great call from the Rich Eisen comparison with him hitting on the Dallas Cowboys and that one being so obviously right to, it looking like the Giants are going to go that way as well. You mentioned it takes two to tango and trying to get up and move up in the NFL draft, but something that I think you could look at sometimes is connections from either general managers or coaches to former places. And with the New England Patriots in the third pick and his relationship with him being Brian Daboll's relationship with the Patriots, as he was there for a little while, maybe that's the team that ends up sliding back. I don't know. For me, the Vikings and the Cardinals feel like a really good mix on teams who could be trade partners. So I kind of have my eyes on the Cardinals and the Vikings being trade partners, but I think the Giants and the Pats, if they were to move up, do you see that? Maybe the Giants trying to get to the third pick in the draft, and when they still go JJ in that case.
I think they might at this point. I think if I had to guess what the Giants board looks like, it feels like Drake May, then McCarthy are the two that they're really keen in on just based on what we've heard. But who knows? We've also seen rumors reported that they really like Daniels. So maybe they just want a quarterback, like they're doing anything they get to get any of these guys. The trade up to 3 makes a lot of sense because I think it makes a lot of sense for the Patriots to trade down from 3. I don't think this roster that the Patriots have is ready for a quarterback. They need to accumulate draft picks, try and still land a top receiver if they can at the 6th pick, and just keep building this team, in my opinion, before they go for a quarterback. There are certain quarterbacks that probably can succeed in that environment. Others probably will not. And then you're going to ruin the career of a young quarterback with a lot of promise. So that's a team I think should trade down. So the Giants trading up there makes sense. And I'm glad that you brought up the connections thing because that is always important. And Joe Schoen actually said that this week, said this is a relationships business and you always keep that line of communication open. And then I'll point to this, Arizona Cardinals, number 4 overall. Their general manager, Monty Ossenfort, used to be with the Tennessee Titans. So did the Giants executive assistant to the general manager, Ryan Cowden. They used to work together in Tennessee. So there's a connection there between the Giants and the Cardinals. So if the Giants want to move up to 3, there's a connection. If they want to move up to 4, there's also a connection. And I think that 4 would be more likely because while I think the Patriots should trade down, I don't really think they're going to. I think they're going to stick and pick, take a quarterback. But then that 4th overall pick, there's going to be a bidding war from the Minnesota Vikings and probably the New York Giants, maybe even the Broncos and the Raiders try and get involved on this, but I think they're picking too far down the board. And if I were the Cardinals, I wouldn't move down to 11 or 12 or wherever those other guys are picking. I would only move down to 6 with the Giants because if you move down to 6, you're still landing either Marvin Harrison Jr. or Malik Neighbors. They need to get that playmaker for Kyler Murray. So moving down a couple spots versus that big swing down to 11 makes more sense for the Cardinals. And then if you're from the Giants perspective, you're not giving up as much to get to 4 as you are to get to 3. So it makes more sense for that team. That would be the trade that I would foresee for the Giants. However, maybe they do get outbid. Maybe the Vikings are able to offer more. That's totally possible as well.
Yeah, it's a good point with the Giants being, much significantly closer to the top half of the draft than like the Vikings. So yes, they have 2 first-round picks, but dropping back to 11 and 23, I believe is the other one that they have. For Arizona is, that's a big difference. So like, I guess you have to weigh what kind of swing do you want to take? Do you want to take that big swing or would you rather on a premier potential blue chip prospect, or move down and really not be in the range for any of those blue chip guys. So that, I would say, that is an advantage that the Giants could offer that a team like the Minnesota Vikings wouldn't be able to do. And I didn't realize the connection between Joe Shane's assistant and the GM of the Cardinals. Like that's another one that you could just add into the mix. I do think that the Giants are going to be aggressive to move up, but we were talking beforehand, like before we even got started here, the consolation prize for the Giants is more than likely going to be, if they can't move up, they'll get Malik Neighbors or Marvin Harrison Jr., and that's a pretty damn good consolation prize.
Yeah, and we'll talk more about Neighbors later in the show, but I would love him at number 6 overall. Like, this is a prospect. I do prefer him. I know it's a contrarian opinion. I know there's a few people who have this opinion. I'm one of them. I like Malik Neighbors a little bit more than Marvin Harrison Jr. Both of those guys are studs, though. Perfect consolation picks or prizes there if you're not able to get the quarterback. But really, the Giants won't find that level of success in this league until they have that quarterback position solidified. So I'm going to always lean towards making that swing, trading that draft capital if you have to, taking the quarterback that's available for you. But Malik Neighbors is probably going to step into the NFL and be a WR1 1,000-yard receiver immediately. So I can't complain about that. Wide receiver is my favorite position in football to watch, just as a personal fun fact about me. Like, that's what I play in flag football. That's what I love, is wide receiver play. My favorite to study on film when I do the draft analysis. So Malik Neighbors would be my number one guy almost every single year that I would want for the Giants, if not for the Giants needing a quarterback so badly. So yeah, I would love to see it happen if it's not a quarterback.
There we go. A couple comments in here we want to get to. Look, Tony, the GM fan, you guys work well together. Show has potential. We'll take it, Tony. Thank you for the kind words there. And then Fear is Grim is hanging out with us, says, yes, more quarterbacks, the better for us, meaning the Jets. We know Fear is, as you can tell by the Aaron Rodgers picture, a Jets fan. But I do agree with that. I think, it wasn't always a lock that JJ McCarthy was going to go in the top 10. At first, it was, 3 quarterbacks going. But I would love if 4 quarterbacks are the first 4 picks, because then that just pushes receivers and tackles down the board, which is, to me, exactly what the New York Jets should be looking for.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's a great point to make. All of this change up happening in the top 5 selections, top 6 selections, just pushes some more talent down the board. If wide receivers are not flying off the board the way we once thought they were, I mean, if you really think back into this pre-draft process, there was a time where it could have been 2 wide receivers in the top 3, maybe 2 in the top 5 at the very least. Now we're talking wide receivers might not come off the board in the top 5, so or until the 5th pick overall. So that's just going to push talent down the board, whether it be those receivers, whether it be those offensive tackles. The Jets are going to luck out here, and I think all those teams picking at the back of the top 10 or right at the front of the top 10 to 11, those teams are lucking out with some talent falling down the board, and I think they're going to be able to land some pretty nice prospects.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that I'm looking forward to. Anything else on JJ McCarthy or the quarterback search for the Giants before we keep the train rolling?
Yeah, the last thing that I'll say on McCarthy in particular, just because I want to keep making this point, I think I've already made it on the show, but when you look at McCarthy, I know a lot of Giants fans are hesitant to McCarthy, don't want him, but when you look back on the history of the quarterback position, you have to put yourself in the shoes of these older 65-year-old general managers and scouts who've been doing this forever. McCarthy perfectly fits the mold that they've always been taught to find. 21-year-old kid with a strong arm who played in a pro-style offense. So I think that there's this kind of narrative going on that McCarthy's having this meteoric rise in draft stock. I don't think that it's actually true. I think he's always had a high draft stock in the league, and now the media is just catching up, because this is the type of player that those old general managers would have fallen in love with 10 years ago. And I think that's what's happening right now. So I think the Giants fans are going to feel hesitant about it because of this media rise in draft stock. But at the end of the day, you got to just trust these pro evaluators. If Brian Daboll loves the kid, then you got to love the kid with him, because Brian Daboll knows quarterback better than pretty much any, average fan knows the quarterback position.
And I think you always bring it up, but I think it's a good thing to bring up, like Daboll's success with Josh Allen, who was incredibly raw coming out. And to me, like, McCarthy's not nearly as raw as what Allen was coming out. Obviously, the Allen ceiling would be great. You hope that McCarthy would become, a top, wherever you want to put him, 3 quarterback in the NFL. But I think his floor would be pretty high with Dable as well. So, yeah, I mean, Giants fans should be excited. And I think Dable deserves the benefit of the doubt when it comes to the quarterback selection.
Totally agreed.
All right, let's hop into the New York Jets. Yesterday, meet with Troy Fautanu. The Washington Pro Day is today. So obviously Michael Penix is going to be a big topic of conversation, but this is a player for me, Anthony, in Fontenot, who's really grown on me the more I've watched him as a prospect. And especially after he measured in and was confirmed the arm length is good and that he's going to play tackle. Honestly, like I think that's really a big thing for him, that he can play at the NFL level, that position. But his flexibility to play tackle or guard, I think, is what is really intriguing, especially for the Jets. And I get it. A lot of Jet fans have transitioned from wanting the offensive lineman to a playmaker. And I'm not going to be upset on draft night if they ended up coming away with a Brock Bowers or a wide receiver. But if they were to draft a guy like Fontenot, I don't think we could scoff at it, because the Jets' sixth lineman is going to play a lot this year. Tyron Smith misses time every single year. Morgan Moses has had surgery this offseason. He's normally an Iron Man, but he had surgery, so that's a red flag. Love Elijah Vera Tucker, but he's gotten hurt the last 2 years and missed significant time. So I think if they were to draft an offensive lineman in the first round, a guy's probably playing a decent amount this year, even though he might be theoretically a backup to start the season.
And correct me if I'm wrong, it's a 1-year deal for Tyron Smith, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So there's an opportunity where maybe he gets hurt middle of the year. Fontenot, if they draft him or whatever tackle, takes over midway through the year, never looks back. You don't really owe anything to Tyron Smith. You could just move on from him at the end of the season. So this could end up being your starter for half of the year, and then for the next 5 to 10 years going forward if you hit on the draft pick. So you have to look at the long-term investment, because at the end of the day, the NFL draft is not about drafting players for the now. It's about drafting players for the future. It's those moves that the Jets made in free agency for Tyron Smith and these other guys. Those were to win now. But a Fontenot pick would be the long-term play, and I don't think that I would hate it. But I do wonder, Matt, how do you feel about him at 10? Do you think that's too rich? Do you think that this should be a trade down target? How are you ultimately feeling about his value?
Yeah, that's a good point. I've seen some mocks where he's come off the board at 10. I think that's a little too high for me. If they wanted to go offensive line, I think I would rather Fuanga, who would probably be there at 10 anyway. He's someone else who could play tackle or guard. But if they were to drop back, I don't know, 5, 7 spots and then pick up a second round pick in the process, and then they go, all right, so you have, let's say, pick 16 and then the second round pick, still a top 50 pick or somewhere around then. And then they want to go wide receiver in the second round, Roman Wilson, Ricky Pearsall, someone of that ilk. I think that would intrigue me, but not if they're only picking at 10 and then not picking again until 72 and Fontenot's the pick. I don't know if I like it nearly as much.
Yeah, I think that I'd agree with you on that one, but I like the point that you made about Fontenot's ability to play inside outside. I think that's what's really important. Him having the measurements, the arm length to play tackle is huge, but I do think that there's a lot of, you could have a conversation about, do you want this guy to step in day one and be a good tackle, maybe okay tackle, or do you want him to step in from day one and be a great guard? And I know that conversation has come up for many offensive linemen in the past. It seems like the transition for linemen is a little bit easier on the interior. Maybe he steps in day one, just a beast on the interior, but maybe on the outside, not as good. How do you feel about that? Okay, I guess the better way to ask this, do you feel like a guard is worth a first-round selection for this Jets team versus a tackle if that's where he's ultimately going to play as a rookie?
Yeah, I would still think it would be worth it. And I think the good comparison is there was a ton of debate in the 2021 draft when the Jets move up and draft Elijah Vera Tucker, who projected more as a guard. And then it was, well, you gave up a lot of capital to draft a guard and he's a good player, but what's the value of it? And to me, I just think with how poor the Jets offensive line has been over the last for years, it's really close to 10 years now. And as a Giants fan, you know what bad offensive line looks like as well. It can really, really derail an offense. So I'm okay with it. I know some people are like, oh, you can't take a guard in the first round, but if that's where he's going to end up playing and play it at a high level, and even if it bumps someone like John Simpson while he can start, he's not making a ton of money. So if he ended up being like your top backup option, like you could do a lot worse there too. So I'm good with it. I would take the guy who has the flexibility to play guard or tackle. And even if he comes in and is playing guard initially, I think that's fine for me.
Yeah, I'd be in agreement with you. And now I want to ask a little bit of an out of the box question here, right? So they're meeting with Fontenot or Fontenot, however you say it. I always get mixed up with
Me
this
too.
guy's name. They're meeting with him this week, Washington Pro Day today. So maybe they ask him a couple questions about the quarterback that he was protecting
Mhm.
for. I know that he keeps getting brought up in the second round for the Giants. I've kind of gone over injury history with Daniel Jones would be the reason that I wouldn't go for Michael Penix. But how about the Jets who still need a backup quarterback? What if this guy falls a little bit further into round 2? Could you see them getting interested in maybe trading up for Michael Penix? If he falls to them, having an interest in taking him and having him be this developmental backup behind Aaron Rodgers, obviously moving on from Zach Wilson with trade offers on the table. What are your thoughts? What are Jets fans' thoughts on Michael Penix Jr.? Is that even something that's been discussed or considered? I'm curious to know.
Yeah, I feel like there's a good portion of Jet fans that really like Michael Penix, and I like him too. But the injury history that you bring up is certainly a concern for me. His age is also a little bit of a concern. Like he's an older prospect, so even if he's sitting for a couple years, like he probably isn't becoming a starter until like 26 years old. So he would be a little bit on the older side. He's someone where I don't know how high his ceiling is, but I do think he has a relatively high floor because of his accuracy. I like his accuracy, decision making, throwing off the play action, stuff like that. There's a lot to like with him, but like in the back of my mind, the injury concern and the age is what's holding me back. I would think probably unlikely, but there are a lot of things to like about Penix as a quarterback prospect. Maybe you can make the case that like, hey, the Jets have their starter in place. They have a high-end backup in Tyrod Taylor already. Like, why not take the swing on the developmental quarterback who has an injury concern? I get that, but I don't know if they would want to package, the later picks it would take to move up to land him.
Yeah, I think you make some good points there. It would be interesting to see. I think that the Jets, we talked about this, I think, recently in the last episode. The Jets should take a quarterback at some point in this draft to be a developmental piece for them. Maybe going for Michael Penix is too rich. Maybe that's too soon in the draft to go for one. But at some point, I do think adding a youngster into the mix with Aaron Rodgers and Tyrod Taylor, especially considering Rodgers coming off of an injury, Tyrod getting injured almost every time he steps onto a football field. Definitely want to add in a younger guy to the mix, in my opinion.
I agree. I think one of Michael Pratt, Spencer Rattler, or Jordan Travis will be a Jet. Maybe not Spencer Rattler. Rattler might go a little bit higher than the third, fourth. I think third, fourth round is when we could potentially see a quarterback for the Jets, and that to me, I think is like the Travis and Pratt range. So that'll be my prediction. I don't think, yeah. And Furious Grim pops in and says the same thing. Michael Pratt, Jordan Travis. I think that would be more likely than trading up for a quarterback in the second round if one falls.
Definitely. I think that makes sense as well.
All right, let's hop back to the Giants, where, as we talked about the Jets meeting with Fontenot, the Giants busy at LSU meeting with Malik Neighbors. Maybe I could dream the Jets also met with Malik Neighbors as well. But we see both Jaden Daniels and Malik Neighbors on the screen. Your takeaways from the Giants at the LSU Pro Day.
Yeah, takeaways are they're interested in the top prospects, which we already knew. But what I really liked is the way that Malik Neighbors spoke about the Giants. So it seems like this interest is more mutual than anything. He had some really good quotes. I'll read them off. He said, I had a great dinner with those guys. Those are some funny guys to be around. I opened up my personality to those guys. It's not hard to talk to them. They know me personally as a player. I heard Brian Dable, the head coach. He loves the way I play. It's just great to be around the atmosphere with those guys again. And if you also take those quotes and you combine them with the ones that he had in Indianapolis from when he met with the Giants, also in Indianapolis, he said that I feel like the head coach really likes me a lot. So clearly Brian Dable is expressing some sort of interest personally to Malik Neighbors that he keeps pointing out here, which I think is interesting. And I don't blame him. Malik Neighbors is a really fascinating prospect, an awesome player. And if the Giants can't get their quarterback, I think Malik Neighbors is going to be their dream at number 6 overall. And it's a good dream to have because this kid is an absolute stud. But he's not the only LSU prospect that was showing out at the pro day. Obviously, he looked phenomenal. 4.35, 42-inch vert, 6 foot 200. Almost looked like, if you take his measurables and you compare them to Jamar Chase, they're almost exact,
Yep.
which I think is really exciting and bodes well for the future of Malik Neighbors. But he's not the only prospect there. Of course, Brian Thomas Jr. is also a player that the Giants likely had their eye on in a potential trade down situation. And then, of course, Jaden Daniels throwing the football well, had some nice throws. I thought his footwork looked good. His release was really fast, which is something that I know Brian Dable values, a quarterback that can get the ball out of their hands really fast. So Jaden Daniels, also a player that the Giants, I think, are going to meet with, probably have a private workout with. There's a good chance that one of these two LSU players ends up being a New York Giant, but if you had to bet on it, it would more likely be Malik Neighbors.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's going to be tough for them to get up to a spot to get Daniels. And there's some smoke with him to Washington, which I don't think I would take him over Drake May, but maybe that's a conversation for another day. But Neighbors is, I mean, man, he really showed out at that pro day. And I know you don't want to put too much stock into the pro day stuff, right? But like, I think it just aligned with the tape and the hype. Like, there's a lot of good tape on Neighbors. There's a lot of hype around him for good reason. I have Harrison 1, but the gap between Marvin Harrison and Malik Neighbors is not very big for me. And I think you can make a case that that Neighbors is the number 1 receiver in this class. But man, like, just an absolute weapon. I think he's going to be really fun in the NFL. And he gets the Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson comparisons, because they're both LSU receivers. But this just feels like another one where he comes into the league and just pops right away.
I agree with that. I think he's going to be an instant impact player. And one of the reasons why is because when you watch Malik Neighbors, particularly in that game against Alabama, he showed like really good football IQ, the way that he was getting past certain safeties and beating them in routes, fighting back to the football and doing the scramble drill with Jaden Daniels. Those were the things that I saw that were like, okay, not only is his skill set translatable for long-term NFL success, but immediate NFL success. And Malik Neighbors is really a freak of nature. I think in most draft classes, pretty much all of them, he would be the consensus number 1 wide receiver. He just happens to be in this one with Marvin Harrison Jr., who's been considered the number 1 receiver in this draft class for more than 1 year. So, yeah, Malik Neighbors, man, he would be phenomenal. And I want to touch on Jaden Daniels because while I agree with you, it's very unlikely that he makes it to a spot that the Giants could draft him. There is a chance that number 1 pick off the board is Caleb. Number 2 is Drake May. Number 3 is shopped by the Patriots. And the Giants could move up and get Jaden Daniels with a number 3 overall pick. And that's a scenario that I know a lot of fans would love. And while it might be kind of unlikely that that happens, there is an outside chance. So it is worth the Giants doing their due diligence on him and kind of having this conversation of, do we value him enough to move up for him? And I'm always going to be curious after this draft, where did the Giants have these quarterbacks ranked? Like, is it Jaden Daniels 3? Is it McCarthy 3? That's always going to be the big question mark. But if they do trade up to number 3 and take somebody, we'll figure it out then. We'll find out who they preferred of those 2 guys. But yeah, Jaden Daniels, it's going to be interesting to see where he lands. I'm afraid of him going to the Commanders because I feel like he's a really good fit there. And I don't want to see any good quarterback land within our division.
No, totally fair. I feel the same way about the Pats at 3. Like, that's 2 things that we could agree on. You don't want their long-term answer to be found in the top of the NFL draft, but not what you think the Giants prefer. But I'm curious, what would you prefer for the Giants? Is it Daniels or is it JJ McCarthy at this point?
It's probably Jaden Daniels, though I'm starting to question it. It's been Jaden Daniels as my preference this whole time until recently. I've just started to, study these guys a little bit more. I've gotten my hands on some more all 22 and really been paying more attention to some deeper analytics and stuff. So I'm starting to kind of make this a closer race in my head, but it's still probably Jaden Daniels. And the reason why is because I think that Jaden Daniels is a very similar quarterback in terms of playing style to Tyrod Taylor. And Tyrod Taylor looked really good in the Giants offense last year in the few games that he started. He's got the very similar skill set where these guys are mobile, but they're very thin. And they also throw the deep ball extremely well. And all of those things really propelled Tyrod Taylor into a little bit of success there. So I do think that there's a world where Jaden Daniels steps into this offense and has at least the same impact as Tyrod Taylor did last season, if not far surpasses it, because he is a more dynamic player with better legs and rushing ability and all those things factored in. So it's going to be Jaden Daniels because I think it's a perfect scheme fit. But there would probably be other teams that, if you ask me that question, and I think the Patriots might be one of them, where I'd say McCarthy. So it's getting pretty close in that race for me, but I'm still leaning Daniels.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think for Daniels more than anybody, I think circumstance matters where he goes. Like if he goes to the Patriots, I don't know if there's enough there for him to be successful.
I
While
agree.
I know you can make the case like, well, the Giants' skill position isn't great and their offensive line still a work in progress, but I think they have the benefit of the doubt again because you have Brian Dable there to help develop. So I don't think you can make that same argument for the Giants, but for the Pats, man, that's really barren. And maybe you would prefer the guy who maybe has the higher floor, which, in my opinion, I think JJ McCarthy has the higher floor than Jaden Daniels does.
Yeah, I would say so. But the ceiling, of course, for Jaden Daniels is higher because he's got the legs, he's got the rushing ability that's so rare and can make him a Lamar Jackson level player in the NFL if it's the right situation. But I do agree with you. I think he's a player that needs to be with the right coach and in the right situation. McCarthy, because he ran that pro style offense and handed the ball off a lot at Michigan, I feel like he can kind of land in any situation. Obviously, some are going to be better than others, but he can land in any and probably at least be a serviceable starter to begin his career. But for Jaden Daniels, a player that you probably need to build the offense around and scheme around in order to find success with him, that's going to take probably a head coach with an offensive background and a little bit more of a forward-thinking quarterback developmental mindset. And that would be Brian Dable. I don't know if he finds success like that with the New England Patriots. I could be wrong, but I think that that's going to be a really tricky situation for any quarterback that steps in, which is why I think that if New England is sitting there on the board at 3, they should take the King's ransom that they get for a trade up to 3 and then move on and find a quarterback in the future. Maybe it ends up being Dak Prescott next offseason. Who knows? But I think the Patriots really should trade down and not potentially ruin the career of an exciting player like Jaden Daniels.
I'm with you on that one. Peter S. chimes in and says everything in the top 10 is controlled by the Vikings because they have the most ammunition to move up. Do you agree with his comment about the Vikings having, I guess, 1, the ammunition, and 2, that the rest of the top 10 is controlled by them?
They have the ammunition, but I think that this top 10 is ultimately controlled by the New England Patriots and what they decide to do with that 3rd overall pick. If they decide to trade down, then the Vikings get involved here because they have more ammunition than anybody, but it creates a huge domino effect. If the Patriots trade down, then there's probably a quarterback falling into the laps of the Giants at 6. So, if the Giants aren't the team trading up to number 3, so that could have a major shakeup if it's the Vikings moving into 3, whatever it might be. It's really the Patriots that I think control it, but the Vikings, with all that draft capital, have more ammunition than anybody to move up. But again, as we kind of talked about earlier in the show, it might be a tough sell for the Patriots to go down from 3 to 11 versus down from 3 to 6. So the Patriots, I think, would be the team that really controls what happens in the top 10.
Yeah, I agree. To me, the Patriots, even more than you made the case for Arizona too, with the Giants and trading back to 11 and 23 with the Minnesota Vikings. But New England especially, they need blue chip players badly. I don't think it would be wise for them to move back. But I mean, as a Jets fan, sure, trade back to 11 and 23. I don't want any of the blue. I don't want Marvin Harrison going to New England, although having Sauce Gardner it helps a little bit with that fear. But still, you don't want to see a blue chipper go to your division rival.
Totally. I think that's a good point. And that's, again, one of my fears with the Commanders picking at number 2. What happens there if they take Drake May? I mean, anybody who follows along with me knows how high I am on Drake May and how much I love him as a prospect. So I'm definitely fearful of them landing their quarterback of the future, although the Commanders seem to mess up the quarterback of the future thing like every single opportunity that they get. So I don't know how afraid I should be, but this time I am pretty fearful just because I think Drake May is that special.
I'm with you. I like Drake May a lot too. Let's close out the show with some other options for the New York Jets because we talked a lot recently about Jadeveon Clowney. He met with the New York Jets. Supposedly the meeting went really well, but he ends up going home to the Carolina Panthers. He's from the area. He got good money, 2 years up to $24 million. So now the Jets are kind of in a spot where they are likely going to pivot. I hope, and I got to put this out into the ether, the pivot cannot be the 10th pick. They did this last year when they took Will McDonald in the first round. The pivot cannot be a defensive player in the first round for the 150th year in a row, it feels like. But I do think that adding a veteran would make sense. And to me, I think the name that makes the most sense is the guy that I put the picture up on the screen, Calais Campbell. Yes, he also kind of plays the interior. He's kind of he bounces back and forth between the interior and the edge player, but he's up there in age, but still a very solid run defender, which is the connection with Jadeveon Clowney. They kind of fit the same bill. But he also had one of his better pass rushing seasons since probably he was in Jacksonville. So I still think he has enough left in the tank.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And listen, Calais Campbell used to be one of the best defensive players in all of football, and he still kind of is. Like, he's still one of the best pass rushers, beefy guy, plays inside, outside, as you mentioned. That would be a great one. Another player, more low key, that I would mention, and this is probably someone you sign quite a bit after the draft, Kyle Van Noy. He's bounced around a bunch of different teams the past few years, similar to Jadeveon Clowney, but still somehow finds a way to be productive with every team. Just kind of goes to a team and gets a few sacks and is a good rotational pass rusher no matter where he goes. I think that Kyle Van Noy, probably you wouldn't sign him and hope for him to be your every down starter like you were hoping with Jadeveon Clowney, is, being that edge setting pass rusher. But with Van Noy, at least as a rotational guy, I think that he could make sense, and he'd probably be had on a very cheap 1-year deal as well.
Yeah, Van Noy, maybe one of the more quiet 9-sack seasons from last year. I pulled up his numbers. I figured he'd be closer to where he is normally, between somewhere between 5 and 7 sacks. But a 9-sack season in Baltimore, a similar mindset or a similar kind of player with Kyle Van Noy, who's more of a situational pass rusher. But the Jets have also, it feels like they've been linked for like 5 years to Yannick Ngakoue. And he had a tough year with the Bears this past season, but he's someone who's racked up double-digit sacks before. Different kind of player than a Calais Campbell, who's obviously like stout against the run. That's not what Yannick Ngakoue is. He'd be more of like that, put him in on third down and kind of just let him do his thing. But that's a name that Jet fans have talked about for, I'm going to say, probably at least 5 years, even going back to the times when he was in Jacksonville.
Yeah, he makes sense as well as a rotational pass rusher. Again, I think if you want someone who's stout against the run, you got to go ahead and take the swing with Calais Campbell. It's going to be a little bit more expensive, but you're getting what you're paying for there. He's still a great player. Carl Lawson, it says on PFF that he's still available. Any chance of a reunion there?
He looked very, very done last year, unfortunately. I loved the signing, by the way, when they added him from Cincinnati. And in 2022, the 1 year he was here and healthy, he was solid for the Jets. I think he had 7 sacks, played all 17 games, but unfortunately injuries just took over. He only played 6 games last year, missed all of 2021. Unfortunately, I think Carl Lawson's just about done.
Yeah, probably right on that one. I do think, though, you need to prepare for the world where it ends up being Dallas Turner or Jared Verse with the number 10 overall pick.
Stop! Don't put that out into the ether, man. We've spent all off season talking about offensive line versus weapon, and for the Jets to come out and call Jared Verse at pick 10, I don't know. It's not going to be a happy show the next time we talk after that. I'll tell you that.
Oh, that would be classic Jets. I mean, Jets fans would be rioting. It would be classic Jets for that to happen.
Yeah, but and the thing is too, and same debate with Will McDonald. It's not about the player. They could end up turning into a good player, but it's just like, I don't know. Like, you had the historically bad offense and major question marks along the offensive line and wide receiver room, and you have a really good draft for both of those things. Then you're going to take the swing on a defensive player. It would. You're right. That would be very Jets. I'd be insanely frustrated if that was the move. That's why I'm just sign Calais Campbell, man. Pay the 1 year, $8 million, whatever it is. These defensive players, they love coming in and playing for Robert Saleh. He's at the back end of his career, but with Aaron Rodgers coming back, you're kind of loading up to go on a 1 or 2 year run and try to make the most of it.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's the right play. Calais Campbell in the similar vein as Jadeveon Clowney, who obviously I thought would have been a great signing for the Jets. And, him going to the Panthers, a little bit of a sting there, but it makes sense for him personally. So Campbell would be the guy, in my opinion. Some of these other guys are more rotational pass rushers, but Campbell can give you that production on first and second down against the run. And I think that's exactly what the Jets are looking for. And, if it's not Jared Verse or Dallas Turner with the number 10 overall pick, maybe it's them with the number 17 if they end up trading down. Who knows?
Yeah, there you go. So we will see what happens there. Before we get out of here, any final thoughts on things to look for Jets and Giants wise before we talk next on Monday?
Yeah, I think that the free agency buzz is really going to quiet down unless the Jets go out there and get a guy like a Calais Campbell. I don't think the Giants are really going to sign anybody until the draft, but it's going to be interesting to see all the different rumors that keep popping up, who these teams meet with. And of course, we'll keep updating everybody about those things on the show and keeping an eye on that ourselves. But it's going to be a lot of rumors and a lot of speculation. And I think the next domino that I'm waiting to see whether or not it falls before the draft, do the trades happen on draft night, or is there one that happens 2, 3, a week beforehand? That's what I'm going to be really curious to see. I think that there could be a trade like when the Jets made that one in 2018 for Darnold. That didn't happen the night of the draft. That happened well before. I'm wondering whether or not that will happen this year. And I think that's going to be what really shakes up the top of the NFL draft.
Exactly. It's a little quiet right now. That's kind of what I was going to say to close here. I don't expect to hear much Jets and Giants, but I'm very excited to talk again on Monday, and maybe we get some leaks on how things went with JJ McCarthy on Sunday. I think that's going to be the lead on Monday's show, if I had to guess.
Yeah, and I'm excited for it. I mean, JJ McCarthy, the most polarizing player in this draft right now, but he's somebody that I'm getting pretty excited about. I think that there's a lot to like. And again, like I keep saying, and as you've said as well, if Brian Dable likes him and Brian Dable, we believe he's this quarterback guru and knows exactly what he's doing developing these guys, if he likes the quarterback, whichever one that is that the Giants take, I got to just trust in him and be happy with it.
Perfect. That's going to do it for us on this episode. Make sure to follow along with the channel here. So if you're new, subscribe, like the video, really helps us out a lot. We appreciate you guys hopping in. It's been a fun start to this new venture for both of us. Anthony's work, make sure to follow along Fireside Giants and his personal channel for NFL draft content. My stuff, Matt O'Leary NY, talking Jets. I'm going to be on with Jeremy at 3:00 later today. So be on the look for that. That's going to do it. I'm Matt. He's Anthony, and we'll catch you next time.